Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Good evening and welcome to another amazing episode of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson, your host for tonight, along with my co-host,
Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Good evening, everyone.
And we, of course, have another amazing show for you tonight. Before we get into the show and bring on our first guest, I wanted to just do a couple of housekeeping notes. The Black Authors Matter TV Awards process has begun. So the voting started yesterday. It will be going until April 3rd. And you get to vote for your favorite interviews in 15 categories. So what will happen is at the end of the initial process, we will have 5 finalists in each category. And then those 5 finalists will be part of the actual award show that we do on May 13th. That's the date of the award show. So also the National Black Book Festival, our registrations are way up this year. We're already at 50% in terms of registration space. So if you're planning to attend, the end of March is the end of the early bird period, which means the price goes up on April 1st. So it's the best time to get in is this month for sure. So anyway, we're bringing on our first guest, and we are able to celebrate with her because she has published her 50th book.
Ooh.
So welcome, and Yahrah's been on the show before. So welcome back, Yahrah St. John. That's the name she goes by as a writer. Welcome back to Black Authors Matter TV, and congratulations on your recent celebration of your anniversary. Well, your 50th book anniversary. Let me say that. So thank you so much for being on the show again.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
And you just got back from a trip with your hubby. So tell us about where you went and give it just a little wrap up. You're always traveling. Seems like when I see your posts, you're either going somewhere or you're actually there.
Oh yeah. The hubby and I love to travel. And so we were celebrating our 8th anniversary on March 12th. So we took a cruise out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and we went to Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao,
nice.
and St. Lucia. So it was very lovely. Great Norwegian cruise line boat.
Okay, I was going to ask you which cruise line.
Yeah, it was my first Norwegian cruise, and I absolutely loved it. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Okay, well, I haven't been to those destinations yet, but I cruise often, so I just haven't been to the port that you left out of. It goes, I think that, do they call it the Western Caribbean?
Southern Caribbean.
Southern Caribbean. Okay, I knew it was a different part, and those don't leave out of generally.
Right. They don't leave out of Florida. And even though I live here in Florida, I get to cruise often too. But that's why we flew to Puerto Rico, because we wanted the ability to go on some of those different ports that we wouldn't get to,
Makes sense.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I have to do that. It's on my bucket list. So anyway, and happy anniversary, happy 8th anniversary to you and your husband.
Thank you.
I remember when you got married, time goes by so fast.
It does.
Yes, all kinds of great things happening for you, huh?
Yeah, it's been a nice little celebration here from, February, 25th being, the release of Breakpoint, my 50th book, and then, a couple of weeks later, my wedding anniversary. So yeah, it's been a great little run here.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
congratulations.
is nothing to uh be
Sneeze
shy about, you know.
at.
That's a lot of stories.
Oh, wait, hold the book up again. We can't do that in passing.
All
Yeah,
right.
and this is called Breakpoint. It's
What?
about tennis.
I was about to say that looks like tennis.
Yeah, sports romance.
Okay, so tell us about the story. What's going on the tennis court?
On the tennis court, Tegan is a former, minor league tennis player with, visions of grandeur, and she gets an injury and is unable to play tennis. But her first love, Dominic, goes on to become, a tennis star like, the big ones of the world. And I'm having a brain fart on some of the men. Anywho. I'm thinking Serena, but anywho, so they meet years later, a decade later, and he's a tennis superstar, and she's, a real estate agent, and her business is down and out, and she joins a country club who is about to start a tennis tournament, and they decide to tap into her being an ex-tennis player, and lo and behold, he's taken a hiatus and the two of them reconnect after all these years. So it's kind of like that sports romance, but it's also a second chance romance, a rekindling, what they once had on the tennis courts.
I've been
Well,
hearing more and more about the second chance romance as a trope.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I like the fact that it's going on the tennis court because tennis is going through a really big boom right now. There are a lot of not just African American but Black French players as well, and I'm here for it. I mean, my family and I have really gotten into tennis, so it's nice to see you take this sport that some people thought was only for white people or only for the elite, and you're bringing a really positive spotlight on it.
Yeah, they asked me because the first couple of books under the new Afterglow line kind of had a kind of athletic theme, if you will, from my yoga and ballet. And I wanted different things that you don't typically see, African Americans in. Those were different genres. I hadn't, you don't see African Americans, and I'd never written about them. Hadn't even taken a yoga class and knew nothing about ballet. But I was able to, tap into, a yoga instructor who I
Mhm.
knew, who helped me with Frenemy Fix Up and going toe to toe with a friend who owned a ballet school. So, and then another friend of mine happened to play tennis. And right here in Lake Nona in Orlando, Florida, we have the national, what is it called? The USTA, where they
Yes,
all play here in Lake
U.S.
Nona.
Tennis Association.
Thank you, the U.S. Tennis Association, and and so I was able to go there and talk to people and get some insight to really help me with the book.
Well, I'm going to tell you now. I don't know if you've ever been to a tennis tournament.
I've not been.
You should go. It is, even if you don't, well, if you don't like tennis, you're going to like it when you go to the tennis tournament. But the whole event is a whole vibe. I live in the DC area,
Mhm.
and we have the DC Open, also called the Butler Open. And that was my first time going to a live tennis tournament. And there are tennis matches going on multiple courts. So you kind of get to choose. You can either get a all access ticket where you can see the big matches, or you can just get like a day pass and then just pop in and watch a tennis tournament. But the music, the food, the drinks, and just to watch everybody cheering for their favorite tennis player, you've got to go.
It's a
In
vibe.
fact, come visit me. Come visit me in DC this summer, and I will take you to the Butler tournament.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. I like that.
Yeah. I'm drawing up. I can't remember where are Venus and Serena from. Are they from? Do
They're
y'all
from
remember?
Compton.
Oh,
Yeah,
Compton. That's right.
I'm
That's
from
right. So
Cali.
not definitely not DC. It's on the way on the other
No,
side of the country.
Francis Tiafo, who's a black tennis player, he's from the DC area.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I watched the movie with Will Smith and everything too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
Richard.
King Richard.
Yes.
And he did a good job with that.
He did.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The circumstances.
Yeah, that's why I said he played we're gonna say he did a good job in the movie.
His acting in the movie was
Yes.
well
Yes.
done.
Yeah, he's perfected the role, I think, of because he did the same thing in The Pursuit of Happiness. You know, the dad that's trying to make things work with their kid, but in Pursuit of Happiness, he was really going through some stuff. But that was based on a true story.
Yeah.
But anyway, so do you play tennis at all, Yahrah? Do you watch tennis or play tennis?
I don't play a lick of tennis. My dad, rest in peace, he loved tennis. He would watch it. I would come down and he'd be watching it for hours and hours, just sitting. He had his man cave down in the basement.
Yes.
TV set up with his big, reclining, chair, and he would just go all in for hours watching the US Open, the French Open, just watching all of it. He just loved it. And so I'd been exposed to it, and I'd watched it with him a little bit, and he would try to explain it to me and everything. But I never got that love of it like he did. So yeah, it's funny that I would decide to write a book about it.
Well, writing this book, you had to learn a little bit more about the sport. Do you think it's kind of sparked an interest? Do you want to watch it a little bit more now?
Yeah, I do. I want to watch it a little bit more now, because now I think I understand it a little bit better and understand the back and forth and just what some of the, the terms and everything mean. So, as you said, sometimes, I've never loved baseball, but when my dad used to take me to a live baseball game, like you said, the energy of the people,
yes,
the excitement, and having hot dog and peanuts.
Going to a live baseball game is so fun.
Fun. No,
we're blessed to have two baseball teams near us, because we have the Washington Nationals, or you can go down the street to Baltimore and see the Baltimore Orioles. And I've been to both stadiums, and it's a relaxing. Don't go in the depth of summer though. Oh my goodness, the sun is right on you. Make sure you bring a hat.
I'm from Chicago, so we had the two teams as well, the Cubs and the
White Sox.
Yes. So we could pick whichever, and so got to go to quite a few games, and yeah, you just love it when you go live. So I can definitely see how going to a live tennis match could be really exciting. It sounds fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
You think you're gonna write some more tennis centered books now that you're starting to get an appreciation for it?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about writing another,
Yeah, we need a part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Yeah, if it's so well received. Yeah. There might be a part 2. Who knows?
Like that.
Could make a reappearance.
Now, is this the last book in the series? Because I know
it is.
Okay.
It's kind of bittersweet, because I've been writing it for like 3 years.
Oh.
So it's almost like 2 books a year, just about. So to go from, and then I started them with the Desire line with different covers, so halfway in the middle of my series, the Desire line closes, but I felt for myself and for my readers that I wanted to finish the series. I don't like leaving things unfinished.
Right.
And there were stories that I still had to tell. I had still 3 other Jim's stories to tell. And I was proud that I got, I talked to Harlequin and they were with me, but they're like, hey, it's going to be 3 different covers and 3 new covers concepts. And, but yeah, I was finally able to finish the whole series and see it to the end. So I'm really proud of that.
Okay. I was speaking at an event on Saturday to a book club that was celebrating like this. And I'm trying to get the president of the book club on the show, but they have been in existence since 1967. Wow. And I have never heard of a book club where the original founders have all passed away.
Wow.
All of them. But the later members kept it going.
That's fantastic.
So, but they were asking questions from the audience, and they asked, it was me and another author, actually, Phyllis Dixon, who's been on the show, Rhonda.
Mm-hmm.
And you've interviewed her on when she came to the festival, I think. But she writes more women's fiction. But they asked us, was writer's block a real thing? And how do you overcome it? So uh, we said yes, it is a real thing. And so with you having 50 books, what are some of the tools you use, strategies for overcoming writer's block?
I'm actually going through my first ever writer's block as we speak. Believe it or not,
Mm.
after 20 years of being a published author, and now I think for me, I think the writer's block just came from working full time and
Yes.
writing as well. So just trying to
Mhm.
keep up that pace, being married, getting married and just trying to navigate all those different roles, wife, and then I'm a stepmom, and so all
Y-
those roles I think just were
You
a
know,
lot.
it's so interesting that you say that because sometimes we're like, why can't I get it done? I finally have a day to get it done, but then you have to think about it. You worked 5 days a week. You
Mhm.
probably had a commute to your job and then a commute back home. You're probably making dinner for the kids. And then, so really, you only have maybe a few hours on a Saturday or a Sunday to try to get everything done that you pushed off until the weekend. And I think sometimes when we look at it like that, we have to start giving ourselves some grace. We're not going to be able to get everything done in about 4 or 5 hours once a week.
Yes. And that's what I'm doing right now. I know a lot of readers want to know what I'm doing next, but I am giving myself this grace to, hey,
Yes.
hit this milestone
Yeah,
after 20 years
amazing.
of being in the business and trying to stay relevant. Somehow I managed to do that in 20 years with all the highs and the lows and the flows and of the publishing industry. And so I'm just trying to give myself, whether that's 6 months or a year, to
Hmm.
just refresh. I still love writing. I still love reading. I'm still reading. Even though I may
Mhm.
not be writing, I'm still reading. So
Mhm.
my love of books hasn't gone away. I just need a little break where I don't feel pressure or
Yes.
deadlines. And so I just need a little grace to just like woosha. And so
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing now. So I guess if I had any advice, I would, as Rhonda said, give ourselves grace because I have been putting in 8 to 10 hour days on Saturdays and Sundays to finish the books that you see here.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
wasn't easy to get here. I'm very proud of them. I love what I've been able to do. But, it took a little bit of a toll mentally and physically. And so I'm just taking a little break. And you're seeing me travel a little bit more the last year or so. And so that's bringing me a little bit of joy and spending some time with my husband and family. And so that's what I'm doing right now to help overcome that writer's block.
Yeah. And all
Well,
of these
awesome.
trips are good, could be settings,
I
for
That's true.
story.
A
That's
couple
true.
ideas.
It's
So
research. It's
Yeah.
research.
a couple of ideas came up. I was sitting in Aruba and my husband and I were on having this sunset dinner on the beach, and I was like, this is a scene in one of my books. This
Yeah.
straight up scene in one of my I like saw it in my mind's eye. So I was like, I was taking pictures of the moment, trying to capture it. So if I ever wanted to like come back and try to, the touch, the taste, the sound of the moment. But yeah, I definitely think it will help spark because already I've put a couple of ideas. I put I use my notes. I think I have like 500 notes, but I'll put
Mhm.
notes of book ideas or things that I want to come back to. I even
The
have
notes app on your phone, or do you write them down?
I put it in my phone. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I put it in the notes on my phone because I can do it, quick and easy. And it's easy for me to go back to at any given moment. So yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I'm always thinking of things. But sometimes I get my best ideas while I'm sitting in church trying to listen to the sermon and sing along with the choir. And all of a sudden these ideas start popping in my head and I have to put them in my notes app and file them away for later because I'm not
Absolutely.
about to be scrolling and researching while I'm trying to praise the Lord.
Sometimes I can be trying to fall asleep. I'll send myself a
Yes.
voice note,
Oh, okay.
and be like, hey, don't forget, this idea you had about XYZ. Those are my ways between using the voice notes and just, voice to text what the idea was in my head. That's how
Hmm.
I keep up with keeping the ideas. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the way to do it. I love it. See, we are kindred spirits in this way.
It sounds like it, yes. Very similar. Very similar.
Yeah. So when you first started, did you envision getting to 50?
Absolutely not. When you first get started, I remember going to Romance Slam Jam and being so nervous to sit there across from Chandra Sparks Taylor at the time. She's an author now, but she was an editor at the time with BET Books. And I remember being so nervous and I just wanted to get that first book deal. So,
Yes.
I don't think I ever thought I would get to this moment. Once I got to 10, I was like, oh, 10, yes. And then 25. And then there was a long time between 25 and 50.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, I would give myself like little increments, basically.
Hmm.
Okay.
Say, okay, you got through 10, 25, and then my next one was 50. So yeah, that was a long break in there. But yeah, I don't think when I published that first book, One Magic Moment, I thought I'd ever get to see, 50 with Breakpoint.
So it was called One Magic Moment.
One
So
Magic Moment.
have you self-published any books or are they all
I
through this
have.
publisher?
I've self-published probably about 13. My
Oh, okay. Okay.
last self-published series was called The Mitchell Brothers. It was
Hmm.
based, my husband is, a retired veteran, uh, after serving 21 years. Um, and so I came up with the idea, and each of his brothers, so to add to that, each of his brothers served in a different branch. So my husband was
Oh,
Army, my brother-in-law was Marines, and my
I
other
love
brother was
that.
Navy.
That's a
So I
story right
spent
there.
That's a story. And so several
okay.
years ago, I decided to start writing, and I wanted to self-pub it and tell it the way I wanted to. I didn't want any,
Hmm.
interference. I knew exactly what I wanted to write. And so, yeah, I self-pubbed it. And so we had Claimed by the Hero, um, I'm getting Seducing the Seal and Guarding His Princess. Yes. Those are the three. So you can find both of the all three Mitchell Brothers series on Amazon. So
So how do you choose what you want to self-publish and what you're going to traditionally publish?
good question. With that particular series, I just knew I wanted a longer book. And at the time when I was writing back then, when I started that series, Harlequin was only doing like 55,000 words. And
Okay.
I knew those stories were going to be 75, 80,000 words. And
Hmm.
so I wasn't going to sell that to them knowing that I had a bigger book, in my heart to write. And so I decided to self-pub that one. Earlier on, I did another very long series of 7 books. People probably don't even, it's called the Heart series. I started out with the first 4 books. And then fans really liked it. So then I expanded it to some cousins and I did another little trilogy of 3 books to add on to that one. So, and that one was when, it was real, self-publishing was really hot and,
Right.
money was like falling out of the trees. And I was like, oh yeah, I gotta, get with the time. So I did those, but my Mitchell Brothers series was my last few of the last couple of years that I did self-pub.
Okay.
And
Now
I think,
somebody made
I
a
want to add one
comment.
more thing. I'll add one
Oh,
more thing to that. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Is that I do think I might do a little bit more self-pub in the future just because I just, I don't want any limits. books.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's just some stories in my head that I want to tell that I don't want any limits or restrictions on how I tell it. So I think I have a few more in me that are going to be self-pub.
Okay. Well, that's why I self-publish. But someone had a statement, and I'm thinking maybe you can respond to it
Sure.
from your experience. She said she has four, Vanessa Roden is her name. She says, I have four unpublished books on my table. I don't know what I'm waiting for. So someone who's written books and they haven't pulled the trigger on them yet for whatever reason, um, what advice can you lend as far as making the first step towards being published? Either, the traditional route or the self-publishing route, since you've done both.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
would, if she wants to go the traditional route, I would just make sure, she's really, gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and had, some readers, some beta readers read it,
Mm-hmm.
and get some feedback before, she submits and puts out that query letter and it's been a while since I've had to do a query letter. That was like
Stop
2020.
bragging now. Stop bragging.
What is it? But the three sample chapters, do they still do three sample chapters?
I
I'm
think
aging
so.
myself.
I think from the ages that have been on the show, I think that
Yeah.
is still a thing.
But if she's gonna self-pub, finding a good editor, reaching out in the community, if she gets a good editor, I still think having beta readers is very important as a new author, to make sure you're finding your voice. But if she can find a good editor before she puts it out there, because you always want to put out your best work. You never want
Right.
to get
Yes.
slammed on Amazon with the reviews, so.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost, is it better to have no reviews at all or mixed reviews?
Oh.
Few mixed reviews.
I
What
think
do
I've
you think?
had a mix of, I most of my books do 4 to 5 stars, but occasionally there's a 2 or 3 star.
Yeah, we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
We're not, yeah, it's just not going to suit everyone, and that's fine,
Yeah,
as long as.
and shouts out to the trolls because there's always going to be a troll who feels like they have to bring you back down to earth. So
Right.
they're going to purposely give you a 1-star review or a 2-star review and not tell you why. They're just going to put the
Yeah,
stars
they just
and
put,
run off.
I hate those. Yeah, those really upset me. I'm like, tell me why.
That's what I'm saying. I don't have a problem if you didn't like my book, but at least tell me why. Maybe I can learn from it.
Right. Improve. What do I need to, is it story or plot,
Right.
characterization? What do I need? What was missing or the missing piece? So,
Yeah, especially if it's less than a three. If it's a one or a two,
yeah,
they should tell you why.
absolutely.
Not just do a drive-by bad rating.
Absolutely. I agree
So,
with you.
if you're gonna do it, put it out there. At least have the spine or the courage of your convictions to say what
Mm-hmm.
it is.
I agree with you, Gwen. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you don't have you're waiting, you're on a hiatus, so to speak now. After 50, you're gonna be celebrating 50 for a while, which is worthy of celebration for sure. And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I don't think I'm gonna get to 50, but who knows?
You never know. You
Yeah,
just,
I'm at 15 and I don't, but I'm thinking I'm gonna have two books come out this year. But see, I have a mixture of genres, so I'm gonna
mhm.
have one children's book in my series, and then I have a nonfiction book that I'm working on.
Yeah. I have
So
24, but I'm gonna have 25 by the end of the year because I want to do a holiday novel, or a holiday novella, I should say.
I love holiday novellas. Now that
Yes.
would make me want to write. Maybe something
okay,
short and fun that I could just write something quick and dirty,
Yes.
10,000 words and we're out,
It's a
So
short
that
story.
it would come very, very, that comes very easy to me because I would tell people I could write, when I'm having a good day writing in my, little she study here, I can write 25 to 50 pages in a day. So yeah, when
That's
I'm in the
good.
zone.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean
you have some
that's a good
time.
day. Do some sprint. Do writing. I mean, writing sprints are a thing now. You know, I mean, I've just recently learned about them, but I'm reading up on them a little bit more.
Okay.
Let's say for you just straight write. No interruptions, no phone, no TV. Just write for 30 minutes. And if you do those writing sprints, maybe like every couple of days, you can get your book done pretty quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna 30 minutes is gonna seem like a long time at first, but then the more you write, it's gonna seem like, oh, I'm ready, 30 minutes already. So,
Mhm.
but just keep doing it that way. So that's what I think I'm gonna do is to start my novella because I already know what the story is gonna be. I
Yeah.
just have to start writing.
Yeah. And that's how you get it done.
Well, we're
Absolutely.
at the end of our time,
Well,
Yara.
show us the book again
Oh yeah,
before you leave.
let's look one more time. It's
Absolutely.
Breakpoint, and this is Yara's 50th book. So congratulations again on
Woo!
the milestone. And we were on the journey, part of the journey with you.
Yes, thank you for always supporting me. I appreciate it so much.
Well,
You're
we
welcome.
appreciate you putting out quality stories and we congratulate you for everything that you're doing in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda and Glenn.
All right, have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Okay, so our next guest is new to the show. Um, he's never been on the show, but he was mentioned on the show because he was the winner of our Children's Book Awards in 2023. He was the overall grand um, winner for the whole thing.
Yes.
And his book, A is for Affrilacia, I think I pronounced it correctly, got a perfect score from our
He
judging
said, no,
panel.
you didn't say it
I
right,
didn't.
Glenn.
Okay, well, he'll correct me. Whatever I said wrong, he'll fix it. So, anyway, welcome to, no, it's Appalachia, like Appalachia.
Appalachia?
But anyway, welcome Frank
Af-
X. Walker to Black Authors Matter TV.
Frank, can you please say it correctly?
Affrilacia.
Okay, Appalachia.
It's like I'll throw an apple at you.
So
Affrilacia.
it's almost like
I
it's four
like that.
syllables.
Appalachia.
It's four syllables.
Yes, ma'am. 4.
But that anyway, do you have that book with you? Do you have your latest book handy? And that one too, because that one was so unique when we and he has a sticker on there. He was a winner
Very
for
proud.
Yay.
for our awards. And when we had the judging panel, it was so different. You know, sometimes when you have submissions for an awards process, especially when it's one genre, even though there are different age groups within the genre, but you can start getting a lot of the same types of topics. And yours was so totally different, which made it stand out, but then it was so well done.
Thank you. We were very proud of it. But I think I have to give at least half the credit to the illustrator because the images were so beautiful and captivating, and they just pulled people in of all ages. And we had people in line buying them at book signings for their kids, and they'd read a few pages on the way to the car and come back and get an extra copy because they wanted to keep it.
That's
So,
beautiful. Well, I think I'm glad that you made mention of your illustrator. We talk a lot with children's authors, and we always talk about the process for looking for a good illustrator. I was just talking to a client recently who's working on a book children's book series, and I told her that one of the biggest things that you have to do is find somebody who is going to be able to pull that character out of your head and onto paper and make that character who you want it to be. You shouldn't just settle for somebody because that was all you could find. Find somebody who's going to make your book beautiful, who's going to make your character a real, almost a real life person.
Well, I agree, and I think it helps if you're also a fan of that artist's work.
Yes.
That for me, it was when they asked me for recommendations. Uh, he was at the top of the list, and I really said, "There's no second or third place. I'm not sure what you have to do in your part of it, but please contract this man to do this book. He will understand what I'm trying to do and say here in a way that some other artists might not." And he was also a black man who understood Appalachia and understood the power of color for black children and black people. And I knew he would make these images pop. So, we were able to put that team together and it made a difference.
Was this somebody you already knew?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
I'd known him for 30 years and I watched him
Oh,
work over the years. I collected some of his art. And we had talked about, one day working together on a book project. And, uh, this was my 14th book. But it was the first time I felt like this was the perfect match for him. Uh,
nice.
I needed his art on the cover because he would get it in a way that nobody else would.
so what gave you the idea to do the book?
Well, it honestly wasn't even my idea. I had written the whole thing and published it as a poem, and I went to the opening of that journal when it debuted, and I read it publicly, and somebody in the audience just said, that would make a nice children's book,
Oh,
and I said,
sometimes that's all it takes.
I said,
Wow.
I
Hmm.
never thought about that. And on the way home, it was about a 4 hour drive. I just tried to imagine it as a children's book. And then when I got back to my desk, I sketched it out a little bit because I'm also a visual artist, but I realized that I didn't even want to see my work illustrate that there was somebody more perfect than me to make this thing happen. Uh, and I submitted it, to the local university press, and they were in love with it immediately, and asked
Wonderful.
about the illustrator. And I said, I had one person in mind, let's make it happen. Um,
Well, you hit the jackpot on the first go round.
I did, that's rare, but I hope I didn't use up all my luck. But
Well, since it's succeeded, there's probably some more in that well that you can draw from.
I hope
now,
so. I hope
now,
so.
Frank, I've got to be honest. This zooming back and forth is making us seasick.
Well, I wish I could turn it off. These new computers. They do it on their own. If I move a little bit, it even goes left and right, you know.
I mean,
Oh,
I
wow.
need to get myself a I have
Okay.
this little thing right here, but I have to put batteries in it where because it'll actually move
Hmm.
like when I move, but I don't think it does that zooming back and forth like yours is doing.
Yeah,
Well, I
I
thought it was
apologize.
a nice touch. I was intrigued by it.
I thought
I
it was
don't
a
think
I thought it
anybody's
was
ever
a
done
friend of
that.
yours who was recording you
Yeah, I
and
didn't
was
know
trying to
what
get
was
that
going
perfect
on.
shot.
No, it's the update for this app on this computer. It's
Okay, well,
all the new stuff.
okay, yeah. Well, it's something for
I'll try
us
to
to
be
look
still.
forward to in the
No,
future.
no, no, you are
No,
good. Now that
you're
we know what's
fine.
going on.
But that's good information to have. I didn't know that was happening
Mhm.
with the technology, but so many things are happening
I
technologically.
like it. I mean, you have to let us know what that app is because I'm going to go find it.
It's just a regular Zoom app, but it's the update. And that's the thing. This started happening when I updated all my apps, including the Zoom app, and
Okay.
uh, I was stunned myself. I realized I leaned to the right, and the camera followed me, and I was like, "What just happened?" Uh,
Really? Okay. Because I haven't updated my Zoom. In fact, I'm scared to update it because if I,
you,
I'm scared if I update it and we go live, will it something happen? Because we had to make a change previously because Zoom did an upgrade
gotcha.
and we had to make a change with the Facebook, going live on Facebook. So I'm now on phones. It's an automatic update for a lot of things, but
Mhm.
on the laptop, I'm
All
I'm
right.
I'm nervous
I
about
understand.
changing
I'm
something.
afraid of technology myself, so I feel like, if you add one tech piece past a microphone, I'm in trouble. Uh,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with technology. I just don't like a learning curve if I have to use like for this, the learning curve, I would have to do it offline. I couldn't wait to the show and see. I still wouldn't know if the live was going to work or not until I go live. That's a problem. So, but I still try to stay as on top of it as much as I can because I don't. If you get too far behind, you're really behind. It's like it's like learning math. If you miss the basics or the two steps in the middle, you can't go to the next
yeah,
one.
it's lost. It's lost. Well, I always try
So
to. I mean, I have two computers set up in case one didn't work, or the battery ran out, or the plug, or power went out in the area. All thunderstorm, all those have
we
happened to me before. So I just, try to increase the odds as much as possible.
Ain't
yeah
nothing
we
wrong with that.
no
Well,
that's
let's
not
jump let's jump back
mm-hmm,
to your books. How many books
mm-hmm.
do you have right now?
I have I edited two anthologies. I have 13 collections of poetry and one children's book.
Well, you've
Oh.
been a busy man.
I've It's called sleep apnea.
So you're up late at night when you instead of sleeping you're writing.
Up early in the morning, it's like
Okay.
I've up at 4:30 when it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I've nothing
Yeah.
good on TV, try to be productive. So most of and it also matches my creative rhythm. I'm rested when I wake up, and most of my creative work happens between 4 and 8 in the morning. Then I go to work. Then I go teach. I teach full time at the university, or drop off kids, or uh, do anything else but write. And I can't write at the end of the day. I'm just exhausted. My brain is dead after 10 o'clock. But
Okay.
if I
Now
can
I'm on a different cycle. I have to warm up.
hit,
I do my writing at night. That's when it's
oh.
quiet. So it's the end of the day quiet for
Well,
me when I'm
well, God bless you, because I just run out of energy. It's like a battery for me. I might be awake, but my brain is tired. Uh,
okay.
That's understandable.
Yeah, if you get up at 4:30 or 4 o'clock, yeah, by probably 8 o'clock. So this you on the East Coast?
I am East Coast.
Okay, so this is a little late for you then.
I try not to nod off during this interview.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm on the East Coast as well, and I tell
Yeah.
you, during the second hour, I'm exhausted. So I understand. What part of the East Coast are you in?
I'm in the heartland. I'm in Kentucky, in the middle of the
Oh
country.
wow,
But
I used to live in Kentucky, believe it or not.
where in Kentucky?
I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky when I was in
Okay.
the Army. That was my first duty station.
Yeah, well, that's a safer part of the state. Plus,
Yeah.
y'all had guns, so it was a good place to live.
Well, no, there were some places that we drove past very quietly and at the speed limit because we had to get through it
Hmm.
because we didn't want those police to get us because those were still sundown towns.
Yes, that's my state. Still
So
here
are
some.
you from Kentucky?
I am. I was. My family's been here since the early 1800s. Came over from Virginia
Wow.
and carved out a space in the heartland, in the middle of the state, and just keep marrying and having kids. And we try to leave. I've lived in Alabama and Indiana and New Jersey, uh, but I always come back. I think because I have so many family members, you just want to be near your family. And at some point,
Right.
when parents age, you want to be close to the parents in their last quarter, and didn't get a good job. Uh, and so I'm here. I'll probably retire from my current university, um, but I understand this place. I know how a lot of people show up here and then can't wait to leave because they came from Atlanta or DC, and that would be quite a culture shock to come to Kentucky from some of those beautiful black spaces. But this is yeah, this is Trump country.
Yeah.
You know that I'll just leave it there.
Well, I will tell you that I was shocked and I was disappointed when I was told that I was going to Kentucky, but then I learned to I really enjoyed living there. I was there for 3 years. And I enjoyed driving over to Louisville. You know, I just say Louisville, not Louisville.
Mm.
So you
Right.
got it right. You got it
Lord.
right.
Yeah.
And, driving over to Cincinnati, which was right across the water.
Mhm.
So I actually learned to really enjoy Kentucky.
It can be done. People survive here, but I think you just, like you said, you have to know when to do the speed limit in those
Yes.
towns. And I mean, don't invite challenges that you don't need, uh, but I think what makes a difference if you can do is don't do it alone. You know, I'm one of 11 kids. Uh, I got 5 kids. Uh,
Mm.
the two of them are grown, two have gone off to college, sophomores now, and we got one more in the house right now. Um, but it's easy to, it's affordable. I think it's a great place to raise kids. If you're doing the raising, and if
Mhm.
you're supplementing their education, if you're putting books in their hands, and if you're in control of their social time and cultural space, you can survive anywhere. But I think if you just drop a kid in the middle of nowhere with no support, uh, no matter where they're at, they're not going to make it. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
family is the difference. The
Yes.
village is
Absolutely.
the difference.
The village. I think I went to Louisville once, I think, at a conference, and I ended up staying in Indiana. Isn't it over a bridge? You go over a bridge and you
Yeah.
Yep, Indiana. Indiana,
Uh,
that's
okay.
what it was. You have to
I
drive a
ended
little
up
further to get to
staying there.
Cincinnati.
And
yeah.
I didn't realize I when I booked the hotel, I didn't realize it was in Indiana. I think I did it by the number of miles away that it was. And I had some really good, it was a dish I hadn't really had served before, the way it was served, and it was pinto beans with the cornbread in there. And it was really good.
Yeah,
Well,
well, this
that
is
sounds
this is the,
familiar.
it's the South, so there are a lot of Southern foods and good restaurants. Um, we eat well here. We're not starving.
Yeah, I'm from the South. I just hadn't eaten at a restaurant that served it like that,
Mhm.
you know. And it wasn't even a soul food restaurant. It was at a hotel. It was a hotel
Okay.
restaurant. I don't remember which one it was. But anyway, let me get back to your newest book because you got nominated for an Image Award, an NACP Image Award for Load in Nine Times. And you have a book right there handy. And congratulations on the nomination.
Well,
So
thank you, thank you. We didn't win this time, but
But that's okay. It's an honor to be nominated, right?
it's definitely an honor to be nominated every time anybody mentions the book anywhere. So it's we're not complaining, uh, but we didn't spend all that money and fly out there and wait to find the results out either. But
yeah. Well, that's true. I've been nominated twice, so but they've changed the way they do things.
Mhm.
I was nominated in 2015 and 2016, two different books.
Yeah, I was there in
And
2013
okay.
with my Medgar Evers book. I actually won that year. It's a beautiful big trophy. Uh,
Oh, okay.
um,
Did they still do the literary stuff? Like they did it on a Thursday when I
they've
went.
it's been moved all the way back to
Changed it.
Tuesday, and it's not even
Oh.
it's not
Did
even
they
it's
at least did
virtual.
they at least say your name at the show?
No.
No, they don't the literature people, they
At-
get the award, but it's not included with the main thing.
Yeah.
right.
One of these days I'm gonna submit. I've never submitted for it. But I'm gonna do it one day.
Well, you do it and go to the thing that I think that what surprised me 10 years ago was that uh, I think that the ticket to go to the thing was like $750. Uh, and now they're twice that.
Oh,
Mm.
so there were 500 when I went both times, but we didn't have to buy the ticket.
Okay, well, see,
We
see,
got comp ticket. You didn't get.
no, I didn't get. comp tickets.
They comped two for each nominee.
See,
See,
well,
Gwen batted her eyes at the people. That's what had happened.
No,
see,
no, they just had a different rule. And see now, and I was self-published. Now to get nominated as a self-published author is a lot harder. It's
mm,
not impossible, but it's a lot harder.
they
Because I
keep
think the
changing the
big
rules.
publishers, they figured out this is the route for Black books to submit their
Mm.
books, and so they crowd out the self-published authors.
Right. Well, tell us about what is it? Load
Yeah,
nine
load in
times?
9 times.
Yeah, Loaded Nine Times is I say it's a book about black families in Kentucky before, during, and after the Civil War. And it's a collection of historical poetry, mostly persona poems. So you get to hear from the participants. You hear from enslaved people, slave masters. Abraham Lincoln speaks, Margaret Garner, uh, and mostly soldiers. And the thing about this particular book is set at a refugee camp. A lot of people know about uh, a lot of the places where the Civil War was fought, but there were almost a dozen places in the country where the fort also was a refugee camp, and that meant that you could bring your whole family with you. So in Kentucky, uh, 23,702 African American soldiers had signed up, and almost 15,000 of them brought their families to the
Wow.
refugee camp. So it was a whole city, and they built a hospital, they had schools, the kids could go to school, they had a church, all the things. I mean, it was the first free space in Kentucky right there at that camp because of their families, because of freedom. And they had guns, they could protect themselves. And they had the numbers. Um,
Yeah, sounds like it.
so it was a part of history that they don't teach us, of course. Most of this I
Right.
found out through research. And what drew me to this particular story is that of my third great great grandfather on my father's side and my mother's side were both stationed at Camp Nelson. So I had family there who probably
Oh,
didn't know each other, but they produced kids who eventually met each other, who produced me. Um, and so I have, these strong ties to a place that I've probably driven past 1,000 times in my life, but had no idea
Didn't realize it.
the history.
Now, is your story fiction or is it nonfiction?
It's nonfiction. Yeah,
What?
historical poetry is grounded in historical facts. Of we get to take poetic license, by doing the same thing fiction writers do by giving them voice. But the historical things we can't change, like dates and names and places and the
Hmm.
results. But what people actually said, uh, as much of as possible should be grounded in research. Like we had originally, we were going to published a book with the archival material because there was so much that we found that was available. They've digitized most of the United States Colored Troops archives in Kentucky, so I was able to just plug in a name and get a file of that was 99 pages long that was full of affidavits, registration forms, details
Wow.
about
wow.
uh, my ancestors' health, when he was discharged, where he was sent to, how long he was there, uh, the 10-year odyssey his wife had trying to collect his pension after he passed away. Uh, she had to prove that first that they were married. She had to prove that they had kids. She had to prove that he was in the army and that he died. And she could only do that via affidavit. And these affidavits were these long forms that require
Right.
two witnesses, uh,
Hmm.
especially if you were illiterate. So she couldn't even sign her own name. And so, I have all these documents that have her just marking an X as her name. And then the two witnesses verifying who she was. Uh, but it took her 10 years to prove that she was who she said she was, just for that $14 a month pension that, he had earned that passed on to her. But the
Mm-mm-mm.
service
That's
record,
persistence on her part.
boy,
Yeah.
that stubbornness is still in the family.
I love, I think a lot of people don't realize how much um, African American history is in Kentucky.
Mhm.
Um, one of my biggest, one of my greatest memories and my biggest regrets was I found out that while I was stationed at Fort Knox, there's an airfield there, Godman Army Airfield. And I found out that um, during the time of the Tuskegee Airmen, that was actually an all black Army base.
Mhm.
And I was able to meet a Tuskegee Airman who was stationed at Godman Army
Wow.
Airfield, who lived in Louisville, and I did a great story on him. It was a beautiful story, and my regret is that I cannot find that article anywhere. I've been trying to, yes, I've been trying to go through archives, trying to find it. One day I'm gonna find that story again. I wrote it in 1996,
Mhm.
during Black History Month, and that particular Tuskegee Airman, of course, has passed on. But it was such an honor. I was able to go to his house and sit with him, and he actually had a friend of his come up who was also a, um, a Tuskegee Airman. And I'm sitting in the room with both of these men, and
Wow.
they're sharing their memories. And that was probably one of the biggest honors I've ever had in my entire journalistic life, but I can't find that
Speaking of,
story. I've
yeah,
got
I
to
can
find it
Well,
somewhere.
imagine.
did it get published in a newspaper?
It did. It got published.
Because I think
Um,
newspapers.com, uh,
well,
have you
I
tried
got to
them?
find it. It was a military newspaper. It was called
Okay.
Inside the Turret. It was the Fort Knox newspaper. It was published there. And I don't know if the Elizabethtown newspaper is still around, but they were the ones who published the military paper. So I would have to kind of go back to one of
Okay.
those two papers to find it. It's a little hard, but I'm gonna find it one day.
Well, when you start the search again, one thing that's happening is University of Kentucky archives for the last 4 years have been digitizing all Kentucky newspapers.
Oh wow. Okay.
So you may be able to just
Oh,
get on the computer and go through the UK archives newspaper periodical link and just plug all your information in and get it right there.
That might be an option. I might have to do that.
One of the advantages of the technology, I think that there's
Yes.
yes.
many challenges, but a few pluses too.
And
Yeah.
now,
See,
is
I
there
wouldn't have been able to do it like your what was that, your great grandmother's
Yeah,
um
my third
third,
great great
third great
grandfather,
grand?
and on
Yeah.
both sides. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
you
that
had
was
a
a
long
different, that was a
history.
different story.
Well, that you mentioned the Kentucky history of, and there's so much that what Kentuckians don't know, but most people, when they think about Kentucky and this, it's like people used to say that Kentucky was a great place to be a slave, because there was this idea that somehow it was a benign experience, that there wasn't, that it was somehow a polite form of enslavement here, as if that's even possible. Um, But the truth is, Kentucky contributed more African American troops than any other state in the country to the Civil War effort, which tells you how much they wanted to be free and what they were fighting against. And even the legendary Buffalo Soldiers are an oversized number of them are from Kentucky, because when the war was over, because Kentucky was not at war against the Union, slavery was still legal in Kentucky after the Civil War. So men were still signing up to join the army, to get in exchange for freedom for themselves and their families. So if you signed up, your wife and all your kids were automatically free. So men were still signing up after the war was over. But when they signed up for 3 years. So if you sign up for 3 years after the war is over, it's like, well, what do you do? They sent most of those men to New Mexico, uh, to the Western frontier.
Yeah.
Most of them became Buffalo Soldiers
Oh, wow.
because that happened after the Civil War, and they had 3 years of duty to pull.
And you telling these stories and you writing the book that you did is more valuable now than any other time in history, because now the military is because of these DEI policies,
Yes.
the military is having to pull a lot of the links where you be able to find this information. They're not allowed to teach about the Buffalo Soldiers or the Tuskegee Airmen anymore. Right now, the Arlington National Cemetery is having to delete all of the links where you'd be able to find all of the African American and all of the female service members who are buried there. They're having to remove all of that now. You can't find that anymore. So this is why books like yours are so important, and I hope that you continue to write about the history of Black soldiers and Black history in Kentucky.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. I just found out recently that uh, they removed Medgar Evers' name from the
Yes.
website. I was like, how could you take Medgar Evers' name off the website? But they're trying to make racism legal again. So and they're trying to they're trying unsuccessfully to erase us and our history, but it's too late. We're here.
We're
Uh,
here, and
we
you can't stop the griot tradition. This is
cannot.
why the griot tradition is going to be even more and more important in this day and time.
And if they try banning these books, it's just gonna make them more popular.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, we
'Cause
discussed that on the show. The banned books become bestsellers.
we
So
we all have libraries at home.
yeah, that's true. Well, we're at the end of our time, and I know you're past your normal
It's my
wind down
bedtime.
time.
You can say it. It's my bedtime.
But we really appreciate you coming on the show and show your book covers one more time, just so people can know the amazing work that you're doing. That's the recent book that was nominated for an NAACP Image Award, and then your other book, what won the Black Authors Matter Children's Book Award. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm glad we were able to make the connection and make it work.
Me too. In spite of technology and the late.
Yeah.
All
And I
right.
have
Look,
to find out about that camera.
yes. Just do the update and you'll be taken care of.
Thank you. Have a
All right.
great
Thank
night.
you. Take care. Have a
You
great.
too. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Okay, we learned a lot about Kentucky. I don't know. We haven't really had anybody on that delved into Kentucky history before.
Right.
So, and this is I've only been there that one time, and I want to say it was before COVID, maybe 6, 7 years ago, something like that. I
Yeah,
was there for
it's an interesting state, I'll tell you that.
I was there for a conference, actually about my scholarship book. I was there with it was a counselors. It was a counselors conference, but we are welcoming our next guest, and she is with BK Royston Publishing, which is one of the publishing partners for the show. And her name is Christian Butler, but she also writes under uh, the pseudonym CB Renee. So, welcome. And I don't know, you have CB on the screen, so I guess we'll call you CB. But welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hello. We hear
Yes.
you very
All
well.
right. Thank you
And
guys
I
for
see you with
having
your BE.
me.
Look, I
Yes,
see you with your
listen, because
BEP t-shirt.
we root for everything black around here, honey. I'm in the right place. So I said, let me show up correct.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. I'm so honored to be here, honestly.
And we're so honored to have you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank
I
you.
don't where are you in the world?
I am in Tampa, Florida, but I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. Always repping the 502, no matter
Oh,
where I
it's a
am.
Kentucky night.
Right, we just our
Period.
previous
Period.
guest was in Kentucky, and we
Okay.
were talking
Okay.
about Louisville, and he's been there for like 10 generations or something like that. His family
Yes.
has
Okay.
been in
Yeah. Have you
Kentucky.
all been to Kentucky before?
I've
Yeah, I
been
was
once,
stationed.
but
Yeah, I
Rhonda,
was stationed there for 3 years when I was in the Army. I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you right outside of Louisville.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So you are. Now, do you write fiction exclusively, or
Um,
is this
so
do you just have the one book, or do you have other books?
so this is the first book that I have like under my own pen, if I should say that. But I do have two other projects that I did with in collaboration with organizations that I was working for. So those books are not necessarily like my book. One is like a financial literacy book called the Ujama Workbook that I had with a community organization that I was working for, and then another one is like a collection of stories from the historic Russell neighborhood in Louisville. But my future projects that I do have after this book are more along the lines of fiction, and then I'll be getting into some children's books and tapping into some other lanes too. But for right now, I'm just into the nonfiction and fiction era.
What do
Okay.
you like to write about with your fiction books?
With my fiction, I just like to write about whatever comes to mind. I grew up like reading urban fiction. So with my first book, I kind of like geared towards that because that's what I like to read. So I'm like, I'm gonna like get into what I like first, and then I'll bridge out
Mhm.
into other arenas and areas. But for right now, I love writing books that my people can relate to. So I get that with the urban fiction. So you know, I'm Christian, so it's a lot of God involved, but it's definitely a lot of stuff that people can relate to in the book as well.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the book with
I do
you?
not have a copy of the book present, and then I tried to put the book as my background, but it was flipped the other way, so I just took it off. But no, I'm in the process of moving right now. So everything
Mm.
is packed up, and I was hoping that I
Oh,
would be moved before this came about, but it's okay because you can find it on Amazon under Sydney, Cydney, and if you type CB Renee, it'll pop right up for you.
okay. So it's called Sydney,
Hmm.
and that's just a one-word title, and that's the main character's name, I'm assuming.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what is the book Sydney about?
Uh, so Sydney is a coming of age story. Sydney is a young lady. She's an Afro Latino. I don't know the politically correct word, but her mom's black, her dad's Puerto Rican.
Okay.
She grew up in Brooklyn, rough childhood, raised by her grandmother, and had these group of neighborhood friends. She moved out to California, so the book opens with her life in California with her boyfriend that she moved out to California from Brooklyn with. And it gives the aesthetic at first like, oh, this was her dream to be out here, but she starts going through all of this turmoil, all of these things. So she's basically on a journey to like find herself because the things that she's getting into with her boyfriend is not really how she wants to be and how she was raised to be, the person that her grandmother has her to be. So you kind of get to go on this journey with her as she's growing and coming into herself, getting a voice for herself, advocating for herself. You get to see that transition with her. And there's plans for future, installments of the book. So as I put out different things, you'll actually get to see her growth within the stories. But this one is one that's going to take you on a roller coaster ride. It's got some unaliveness. I don't know if I could say murder on this platform, but it's got that in there.
Yeah.
It's got some drugs. It's got sex. It's got
You
a little
mean
church
murder?
here
You
and
can't. You didn't think you
sprinkled
just
in
said
there.
murder? I don't think murder is a four-letter word,
Well,
but
sometimes they be trying to flag, so I would never want to do that to your platform. But anyways, that's what's
oh,
going on in Sydney. It's basically just that coming of age story of her getting out of that rough relationship, running into an old friend who helps her through that stage, and then every time you think that she's kind of like got it together, then something else happens. So definitely a story that's going to keep you on your toes. Definitely something that puts you in a like, oh, I want to see this on the big screen type of vibe.
And what's the name of the book again?
The book is called Sydney, and it's spelled with a C because of
Okay.
my name being spelled with a C, and it's CY because my mom's name is CY. I like to do stuff that like makes personal sense to me in my life. So
And nothing
yeah.
wrong with that. No,
no,
it's
because
nice to give homage to your family that way.
Mhm. That's where my pen name actually came from. Me and my mom share the same initials. So CB is our initials, and then we both have Renee as our middle name. Boom.
Okay.
oh, okay, that's how they came about. Well, people. come up with titles and characters and settings
Mhm.
for all kinds of different reasons. Um, I named in my children's book series, it's a girl and two boys, and I named the girl Daisy after my mom.
Mhm.
So,
I
you
love
know,
it.
yeah. So a lot of times there's a connection. Sometimes it's just random, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever comes to you when you're writing.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. So how
So
would you describe your characters? I mean, what are their personalities?
Um, So Sydney's an around the way girl. Like if while you reading the book, you're gonna see that like she's in this group, her group of friends. She's the only girl in the group. So she grows up, kind of like rough around the edges a little bit, but she still had
Hmm.
that feminine side because like her grandmother raised her. And so she's around a group of friends. One is a guy who's from Jamaica. Another is another black boy who grew up in the neighborhood. And so she's coming from this like quote unquote projects of Brooklyn and she moved out to California with these bougie people because like the boyfriend that she's with, he's from Brooklyn as well, but he comes from more of a richer family and a richer background. He is black, but they grew up in different like tax brackets in different tax brackets.
Right,
So
right.
when she moved out to California, we open up story opens up with her trying to navigate life through these people who she can't really relate to. So she's trying to be, that. And so she's surrounded by, various people. Like she runs into people from the hood, she runs into business owners and stuff like that. So it's just a cesspool of different personalities when I write.
A cesspool. Okay, now.
Yeah, because you never know what might pop up. Like I said, it's just, you really don't you might think that the book is this, but then here's a scripture popping up. Like it's
Hmm.
just I like to keep people on their toes.
now that you said the setting is Brooklyn and then California. So did you live in those places or did
I
you
did
just
not.
decide you were going to use those as a setting?
I've lived my life vicariously through people who grew up in Brooklyn because I always wanted to be from Brooklyn. Growing up, Crooklyn was my favorite movie, and so like I thought I was Troy. I wanted to live in Brooklyn. I wanted to have the brownstone. Now that I've gotten older, I've been able to appreciate like my country upbringing in Kentucky. But like when I did Sydney, no, that was just something that made it personal to me. Even though this was a completely made up story, that was something that made it personal to me. Have her being from Brooklyn, and then I've always wanted to go to California, and so then I made that setting be a part of there. And then when I was actually writing the book, I like to research and I like to research random things. So I actually got on Google. And so the places that you're seeing like being mentioned in this book, people who read the book from those places are going to be like, oh, okay. Because I actually went on Google Maps and was able to see like what was surrounded in the area. So just to make it as real as possible. So even
Yeah.
though I've never been to those places, you're not going to be able to tell when you read the book.
Well, there's a value in doing that because when I read a book, I'm from New Orleans, and
Hmm.
if I read a book and it is obvious that the author has never been there and all they're doing is using a bunch of stereotypes and all of the tourist places, you know,
Hmm.
we're not going to Cafe Du Monde for breakfast. We're just
Exactly.
not, you know.
Exactly. And
You
is
know,
that where
so
you're gonna get the good beignets? Period, though.
no,
Like,
well, no, I don't mind going to Cafe Du Monde for some beignets, but I have to be in the mood for that. I'm
yeah,
not making a special trip. If I
yeah,
happen to already be in the French Quarter, and newsflash, people from New Orleans don't even like going to the French Quarter like that
right.
because there's nothing but tourists there. But
Hmm.
if we go, yeah, we might stand in line and get some if we have some friends visiting, but we're not going there for breakfast.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
else are we not doing? We're not in the French Quarter eating at a sidewalk cafe. We're not
Hmm.
doing that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I
I
didn't
can
want
tell
that.
when the author
Like,
has not been there.
yeah, now I have not been to California. I've been to New York a few times. I haven't been to California before, but I did my due diligence because I'm like that too. I love to read,
Exactly.
and you can tell when it's inauthentic. You can tell when the language that they're even using is not so
Oh,
even like the
yeah.
slang that I put into the book, like I just did my research. I did my due diligence because I wanted to produce something that people could relate to. And like I said, eventually it's a big screen. So it needs to already have those vibes. So to be able to catch people, to be able to be a waiting to exhale or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I definitely made sure that I did my research when it came to
No,
that.
I love that and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, I didn't get to go to that cafe place you're talking about, Rhonda, when I was in New Orleans. Tell me about it. And so I missed out on the beignets.
Oh,
But what
well, next
I
time we go to New Orleans, we have to get some beignets.
okay,
Period.
the places I ate, the food was excellent. So then the
It
last
was.
one you didn't recommend, it was the recommended by the hotel. And I can't even remember the name. It was a French name, and that probably doesn't help because it's probably a whole bunch of places with names in French.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could
But
be
it was
anything.
right near where I was staying. It was in walking distance,
Okay.
and it was really, really good. And I had good food while I was in New Orleans because I wanted
Oh yeah.
authentic New Orleans food. It was really good. All of it. And I wanted to eat something different each day so I wasn't repeating
Hmm.
same dishes. I wanted, and I got the variety while I was there. Rhonda and I
Right.
were there together, although she's from there, but we were also there together
Yes.
last summer at a conference in
Yeah.
July. And so,
Oh, oh, y'all was hot.
yeah.
Oh, it was hot.
Well, we stayed indoors though, and I live in Houston, so
Oh,
New
yeah.
Orleans heat is nothing compared to here. To
Yeah.
me,
I
we
had to get
Yeah.
used to it. Now
yeah,
I am. I've been in Tampa for about a year, so I'm somewhat used to the heat and humidity now. But
yeah,
woo.
I don't
it's
see how you keep your pretty curls in Tampa because that heat'll dry your hair out.
Look, I use black owned products. Shout out to Kaleidoscope. Make sure y'all go and get my this product. Like I really am big into her stuff. Or, any type of like natural oils and stuff. The water is really hard here and it took like for me to
Mm,
get used to it. But yeah, you find your thing.
yeah. Now you said you were into other writing projects.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about those.
The ones that I have coming or the ones I already have.
The ones that are already published.
Okay. So the first one that I have is called the Ujama Workbook, and basically it's a little girl named Harmony. Her and her dad are going to this Ujama market in her neighborhood, which is a collection of black-owned businesses.
Hmm.
In that market, she has aunts and uncles who teach her about cooperative economics, and so as she's going to these different um people's, the different merchants and whatever they're selling, they're telling her these stories and giving her different lessons. So they're all whatever topics. There's financial literacy, there's self sustainability through like growing your own food and things like that. So it's
Hmm.
basically a game night type of feel. So it's created for children, but for the whole family to participate in to complete the Ujama workbook. So there's different sections and different lessons. At the end of each section, there's an activity for the whole family to participate in. And so essentially, it's like a game night that you would sit down and use this workbook to form like a game night with all the family sitting down. But you're learning together and doing it in a fun way. So that was a book that I did in collaboration with a bunch of different organizations in Louisville. The company that I was working for, the organization that I was working for at the time is called Russell, A Place of Promise. They're focused on Black wealth building in the historic Russell neighborhood. So that one is really good. We teamed up with another organization called Play Cousins Collective that is focused on building villages around our children. And so it's a tool that people can use, and it was free and accessible to the community. I believe they can still go online and get it. We had some physical copies that went out as well, but it's one of those things kind of like bring family time back together, but also in a
Right.
way that, teaches the children and us, a lot of adults who don't know about financial literacy. So it was one of those things kind of like, bring us all together and we learn together, grow together. The other project that I have out was also within the Russell community. Shout out to Russell in Louisville for building and making me who I am today. But this other project that I was a part of, it was from the Louisville Story project. Lord, please y'all don't if I get that wrong. But anyways, I want to say it's the Louisville Story program and Louisville Story project, but they focus on preserving the stories of like, marginalized communities in Louisville. And
Right.
so they did a collection of stories of people in the Russell neighborhood. And a lot of focus was going on in that historic Russell neighborhood in Louisville because a lot of investment was going into this historic neighborhood. Russell in the Louisville community used to be the Harlem of the South, which was that we had our own like businesses. It was like a Black Wall Street in Louisville. And this was a place where people came through. If they were in the music business or whatever, they had to come through Louisville to get to where they needed to go. And so that neighborhood was Russell. It was once one of the richest Black communities in the United States. And so they wanted to they being people within the community who grew up in the community and were doing social justice work wanted to preserve the history of the community. And so they did that through these different projects, one being the Russell Place of Promise organization that I was part of, and another being this project with the book that I was a part of. And so, dang it, I forgot the name of the actual book. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to actually, I don't know, I wasn't prepared to actually like talk about these. I thought I was just going to talk about Sydney. But this other project was basically a collection of stories for people to tell like their time growing up in Russell, because Russell is also a community where it had now became like the one of the most poverty stricken communities in Louisville. And so it went from being this great thing into this. And so when that quote unquote um, people try to come in and invest, we just want to make sure that investment don't look like displacement. So let's
Right.
preserve our stories, let's preserve our history in these different ways. And so I was blessed to be a part of that through storytelling, through the Ujamaa workbook, and on my if you write a letter, send it here is the name of the book. Thank you, Laura, for bringing that. If you write me a letter, send it here. That's the name of the collection of stories from the historic Russell neighborhood. And so that was a mouthful, but I'm very passionate about community work as well. And so I use
I
my
can
voice.
tell. I
Yeah,
can tell.
I love to use my voice. I wasn't always like that. Like when I was younger, you had to really know me to get this part of me. Yeah, I used to, be very timid, very like suppressed. And so now I got my voice, I'm gonna use it in whatever way.
But now I mean, I love the fact that you use your voice, but what was it that got you so passionate about financial readiness and teaching it to children?
Honestly, it was I was being paid for my passion, let me say that. Because I can sit here and say, oh, I really wanted to do it, but it was a part of my job at the time. Like we were supposed to be doing a actual game night as, a part of getting the community to come out and have these
Hmm.
events where we was actually going to teach them about financial literacy in that setting. And then the Play Cousins Collective was going to come out and provide childcare in that setting, while that was going on. And the way that they do their business is that when they are showing up and providing childcare in spaces like community meetings where people usually wouldn't have childcare, then they would create a curriculum for the children around whatever it is that they would be talking about in that meeting. And so COVID happened around this time. And we weren't able to be in person. And so we had to be quick on our feet. How can we still get this initiative out there in a creative way? And so then that's when the Ujamaa workbook came about. Like, hey, everybody's sitting at home, everybody's doing things together, so let's put it in a book form. All the stuff that we wanted to do in person, let's just
Makes
put it in
sense.
book form.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it was presented to myself and a representative from Play Cousins, and she and I worked together to make it happen and got other people within the community to come together. So the stories that you're hearing from the aunts and uncles in that book are actually Black business owners in the local community.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just passionate. To answer your question, it was part of my job. Sorry. It was part of my job, but I've always had this passion for people because that's what I grew up seeing. My mom and my
Right.
dad were both very, they're both ministers. My mom has gone home since, but she was an advocate. I saw her advocating for our people and for us growing up. And so that's something that's just been instilled in me. I saw that growing up. Like I remember watching the Million Man March on TV and my mom like, hey, can
Yes.
you see your dad?
Never gonna forget
Like my
that.
dad was there, like
Okay.
and growing up watching movies that invoked me to think
Mm.
outside of what I was seeing, like Honestly, it was my parents, and I'm gonna try not to cry. Yeah, my parents instilled it.
Yeah, well, it's good that you were able to have that as part of your upbringing,
Yeah,
because
I
not
agree.
everybody does, and
yeah,
so it's beneficial
yeah.
to
Being in
have
community
that.
made me see that though.
Yeah,
See, like,
community is
yeah.
important, very important. Now, how did you get connected with BK Royston Publishing to get
Woo!
your novel out there, Sydney?
I honestly, I don't remember how I met Miss Royston. Like, I just be in the mix. Honestly, I've used social media. I've used social media to build my village. Like even me getting the job at Russell Place of Promise, I started off at Play Cousins Collective, and then when this initiative started, people from Play Cousins went over there. So it was a being around people who know people. Is how I got connected to her, and I feel like it came from that space. Like a lot of the connections that I have now came from like my connection with Play Cousins, and because that was my first like quote unquote like job into the community and social justice work, or going from just sitting at home to actually getting my feet wet doing stuff. And
Right.
after I got connected with that organization, it came. So I don't remember if I met her on social media, what happened, but I know like when it came time for me to want to get the book, I think somebody referred her to me, and I had been following her on social media, and so then we got connected. But the book, Sydney, actually started out as a Facebook story challenge. So it was building, and I turned it into a book, and so yeah, that's
Hmm.
how I got connected with her. Ain't no telling.
How is that Facebook story challenge thing? And what?
So, oh my God, this was in like 2016. People were doing it was hashtag Facebook Story Challenge. You should go check it out, actually. I took all my stuff down because it was good. People was tuning in. People was ready. Yes, so I was posting it one post at a time. And then I was posting, then it
Okay.
went to like one post a day. And so my brother was like, all right, you're gonna turn it into a book. Hurry up and snatch it down because I'm an influencer. I influence a lot of people. I could say they steal from me. Well, it is what it is. Now I'm influenced. It is what it is. So I didn't want that particular part of me to be replicated. And so I took that story down, changed it up a little bit, and created this. But yeah,
Okay,
that's
I
how
didn't know
the
about the
Facebook
Facebook
story challenge.
story challenge. Did you know about that,
Yeah,
Rhonda?
No, but I'm going to look into it because it sounds quite intriguing.
Is a
you should.
hashtag
It was some
Facebook?
interesting stories that happened. And I
Okay.
actually was following another girl. She was writing a story. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I've been writing for a while. I can do this. So I just started, putting my little stuff out there and people started getting interested. And so I ended up, Sydney was a 12-part Facebook stories. And I took those 12 parts and turned it into the 12 chapters, which is now Sydney the novel.
Okay. It's
That,
kind
that
of
really,
like Rhonda, what they did back before social media with the the meetup rooms or whatever online, the chat
hmm
rooms or the
Mm-hmm.
you know not blogs as
hmm
much, but places where like-minded people would get together
Right.
and exchange ideas.
Yeah.
That
Well, they
that
were
was
just,
before social media.
it wasn't really necessarily an exchange of ideas. It was literally people creating stories on Facebook in the form of their posts. And so it I don't know how many other people turned their stories into books. I hope a lot of them. The one that made me start writing Sydney, her story was good. I'm talking about these people were creating characters, scenarios, like it was literally like a soap opera on social media. So yeah, it was Facebook short story challenge. Look it up. It was circa 2016, 17-ish.
Okay. Yeah, but it does sound like what happened before social media
Well,
online.
I'm gonna need you to just go ahead and put a link in the chat so I
So
can
we can
paste it
easily
into
look
the
it up.
Facebook chat.
Hmm.
Okay.
So we can
I have
easily
to do
look it
it
up.
once my segment is over. Then I'll hop on because if
Well,
I
that
hop
time is now. That's what I want for us
okay.
to.
It is 9:30. It is 9:30.
Yeah, that time is now. So, thank you so much for being a
Thank
guest on Black Authors
you.
Matter TV.
Thank
And
you.
check out her name is CB. It's on the screen. Renee. She
Hmm.
writes under CB Renee. And the
Mhm.
title of the book is Sydney with a C, Cydney, right?
Yes, ma'am. You can
Okay.
find it on Amazon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you. Bye, ladies. I'll see y'all next
Thank
time.
you.
All right. Good night. Okay, well, we have our final guest before we bring her on. I do want to remind people about voting in the Black Authors Matter TV Awards process. Vote for your favorite interviews. If you can go to our Facebook page, there's a post that says vote here. It has a link to voting. So just if you don't see it at the top, just scroll down a little bit and you'll see it. It has our logo, the logo that you see on the screen. It has that on there. So we're bringing on our final guest, and she's a historical fiction writer, and she actually um, was part of a group of historical fiction writers that did an online program, and we've had all the authors on except the final one will be on April 1st. So welcome Lauren Francis-Sharma to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. How
Wonderful.
are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I like
Thank
your
you for being
glasses.
here.
Thanks.
Now I was telling the audience that there was the four of you all that had an online event, and you were all historical fiction authors of books that are recently released. So we had Shara Moon on,
Yes.
and we're having you on. We have Victoria Christopher Murray on April 1st. And there was
Wonderful, my
one other author.
friend.
Who was the fourth author that was part of the group of you all? The group of four of you.
Hmm. Oh,
I
actually, let
don't
me.
have it in front of me, but she's already been on the show.
Oh, okay. Not Nancy Johnson.
Yes, Nancy
Oh,
Johnson.
okay, Nancy.
Yeah,
I knew she had a book out that came out. It's a great book, so I'm really excited about that book. Yes.
yeah, she came on a couple of weeks ago. So,
Right. I must say that was pretty recent.
yes. So
Okay,
your book
good.
is called Casualties of Truth. Do you have a copy of the book so you can show it on the screen?
Yeah, I do actually. Let's see. Right there.
Okay, Casualties of
Yes.
Truth. And your storyline is a little bit different from usual because you take your story off American shores to tell a historical story.
Yes,
So,
partially so. Hmm.
yes. So tell us what Casualties of Truth is about.
Yeah, so it's about a young woman who goes to South Africa in 1996 and sits through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's amnesty hearings. So the amnesty hearings that happen after Mandela wins are set up really to allow people on both sides of the resistance fight to tell the truth about what they did and apply for amnesty. So she's there during this time. And some things happen to her in South Africa. She meets a man and she hopes she never sees him again. And then he shows up 2 decades later at a dinner with her and her husband at a restaurant in
Mm.
DC when her life is completely different. And she does not want her husband to know what happened in South Africa to her. And she thinks maybe it's a coincidence, but she learns pretty quickly, like in the middle of dinner, that it's actually not a coincidence that he's there.
Oh, wow. That sounds intriguing.
Mm. It
Yes.
I
does.
like
So
So
is,
that.
is romance in here or is it
no, it's
more
not. No
dramatic?
romance. No,
Okay.
Okay. I like it even more now.
it is a suspense literary novel. So I kind of I was a little afraid to call it suspense, but I think that the minute you open the book, you realize that you're probably going to get something very unexpected. So I think suspense is the right term, even though I know there are lots of mystery writers out there who have a particular idea about what a mystery book is. And this is not a mystery book, but it is suspenseful in many ways. Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is not your first book.
No, it's my third.
Okay.
And even though I've been probably thinking about this book the longest, because I was in South Africa in 1996, and I was not thinking about
Oh,
being a writer. I was an attorney, or I was a law student actually at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, this would make a really interesting story. And I've been sort of playing with that, but I don't think I had the right sort of perspective. I don't think I had the right skill level. I wasn't ready to write this book until now. And it came up during COVID when, many of us were sitting at home thinking about whether or not we were ever actually going to get out again.
Right.
And a lot of books were birthed out of COVID. A whole
Yes, well,
lot.
we had some extra time, but
Hmm.
for me, I was thinking about like all those places that I'd been and all the places I wanted to go back to. And South Africa was a really complex place for me. I mean, obviously, given the time that I was there, which was only 2 years after the elections, the first democratic elections, it was still a really complex, place in terms of race, and a lot of things happened to me that I wasn't expecting to happen, because it was Africa and I was expecting Africa to be a particular thing, and that thing didn't turn out quite the way that I thought. So I'm sitting during COVID and I'm like, why are you keep thinking about this place so much? And when I was at the hearings, I wrote down everything that I heard during the hearings. A part of me just thought, I may never hear anything like this again. I may never see
Right.
what I'm experiencing here again. And so I wrote down every single thing, and I kept those notebooks with me for, I don't know, 25 years almost. And I had it in the basement. And I went down in my basement and I pulled them up and I was like, I think it's time. I think it's time to tell this story.
Wow. So what you have in your book is information that's really not going to be found anywhere else because it's
Right.
firsthand from your point of view,
That's right.
especially as an American going to South Africa.
That's right.
So you really have a unique perspective. And then you can look back on it years later when you reread the information years later. Did did you remember it the way you wrote it? Were you able to
Yeah.
bring all the vision back, the images back to mind?
That's a
I
great question.
was. It is a good question, and I was. And you know why? Because it was so impactful. Like I remember being in there at the time, I think I was probably 20 something years old, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, right, I'm actually going to leave here completely changed by this experience." One of the stories that I heard when I was there, I mean, before leaving the United States, I thought to myself that South Africa and apartheid was very similar to sort of our civil rights movement. And it was, right? I mean, there was, oppression and protests and jail and all that. But what I didn't understand was the machinery of the government, of the South African apartheid government, and how not only were they intent on sort of putting down the resistance, but they were willing to do anything and everything, including murdering women and children, and not just your leaders, but anyone who spoke out, even if you were handing out a pamphlet or at a school, like talking about the resistance, they were watching, they were coming after you. And so I learned a lot about sort of, what governments were willing and would be willing to do to suppress. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, right, if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere, right? And so one of the stories that I heard was about a group of young boys who had they wanted to fight in the resistance, right? They wanted to work for the ANC, and so they met this black double agent. They did not know he was working for the government, and he came along and he was like, "Hey, I'll take you to Mozambique." And I will, have you be in an ANC cell and you'll learn how to shoot and you learn how to resist. And they were like, great. They didn't tell their parents. And they got on this bus one morning and they were taken to a safe house where they were poisoned and tortured and blown up on the bus, and the bus was thrown over a cliff.
Oh my
And I'm
goodness.
sitting there, yes, and it was all cleaned up, right? Like nobody knew. And I'm sitting there as a young 20-something-year-old woman, and I'm watching their parents, their mothers, learn for the first time what had happened to their children. And we were all just I mean, it wasn't a dry eye in the place, right? We're doubled
Yeah,
over. It
yeah.
was just so much pain. So when you asked me if I remembered it, I remembered exactly everything that I felt, everything that I saw watching that. Could I remember all the other details outside of my feelings? Probably not perfectly, but I remember those moments, and I've been thinking and carrying those stories with me for all these years, and just so happened that I felt brave enough finally to put it down on paper.
Wow. Now, when you finally were ready to put it all on paper, though, how did you know where to start? Because you have all of these thoughts swirling around your head, all of these things that you want to include. How do you organize yourself, and then how do you even get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually been thinking about that a lot. I mean, because you're right. I had notepads with that looked like transcripts, right? So I wrote somebody's name, then I put a colon and I wrote what they said. And I would have maybe some reactions that I had like, "Oh my God," or "I can't believe this," or something. But other than that, that was it. So I
Mhm.
knew that I wanted to have a character much like me, an American who kind of goes an outsider, sort of, a little naive and just expecting that she's going on an internship. She's going to learn a little bit about the new Constitution. So I had a character, I had, this history, and then what to do with it, what to do with it. But one of the things that I left South Africa thinking was it enough? Right? Like when I came back and I was thinking about the amnesty hearings, I was thinking about those women, particularly women, who would get up, and many of the victims were able to testify, and they would say, "You took my child, you killed my child, but you never came
Mm,
to me. You never said sorry to me until you were applying for amnesty. And now you want me to forgive you? I don't forgive you. You killed my husband. I don't forgive you. Left me with these children and I had to raise them by myself." And they would just be very pointed in saying, "I'm part of this process. I understand that as a South African that I have to sort of, look toward collective healing and collective justice. But me as an individual, I'm not sure I can do this." And when that kept coming up in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what if? What if there's somebody who really doesn't feel like the process was enough for them? And that's where my
mm,
story took off.
wow.
Okay. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, but I remember asking somebody who was involved in those hearings, the reconciliation hearings, and I asked them, were the people who were harmed compensated monetarily? And they told me no. And I'm like, well, what's the point in having the hearings then? I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah,
it's like window dressing. I mean,
yeah,
it's like you hit me with an 18-wheeler, I survived, but I get nothing.
yeah.
It's so
It's complicated. It's
yeah.
really
I guess
complicated.
it would have to be. Um,
Yeah. I
why
think
did
many
they
people.
choose? Did they say, since you were there during that time, did they say why there was no monetary damages paid, or was it just understood that there wasn't going to be, and it wasn't really? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think that there
that's-
was there were promises that people were going to get lots of things, right? They were going to get that there could be some compensation in some cases, that the people who did what they did would be, if they didn't tell the truth, they would be prosecuted later. Many of those things just didn't happen. And it's a failing of the system. And there are many books that have been written about sort of what went wrong with the amnesty hearings. And, you can talk about sort of the economic, how the reconciliation process itself didn't give Black South Africans the economic power in the country. And so you could talk about that. You could talk about how, a system that's set up to prosecute people, they need evidence in a particular way. And if you tell people that they tell the truth, you can't use that evidence, but you have to find other evidence to prosecute them. And it was such a well run sort of killing machine that it was hard to prosecute people afterward. But most importantly, I think the idea was that we weren't going to be able to know everything that happened because everything was so suppressed in the country, right? Like, think about how little we knew as Americans about what was happening on the ground because they were keeping outside media out and they were controlling their media inside, right? And so Black people were telling the world, trying to scream like, you don't understand what's happening here. They're killing us, they're taking our children, they're kidnapping, they're murdering, they're torturing, blah 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 blah, and nobody could hear. And so part of the hearings was really about bringing the truth to light finally. Oh, I'm not crazy. I know you took my child. I know you told me that she ran off with a boy and didn't want to be contacted, but in fact, you killed her. And this was the kind of thing that kept coming up over and over again. So in some respects, the hearings were necessary because people wanted to know the stories. They wanted to be heard, they wanted to be seen, and they wanted to be told the truth. And so it was very healing for a lot of people to finally understand what had happened as a whole, not just my individual thing, but what happened to the neighbor down the street. And I think that there was something really important about it. And more than that, though, for me, and by the way, I don't come on either side of this, but more than that, for me, I really think that Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, with these stories, I think they were warning the world. Look at this. Look at what these people did. Look at what we can learn from what these people have done. And if there's anything that we can take from that right now in this country that we're living in, there's a lot a lot of things that are very similar in the way that our current administration is operating in the same way that the National Party began to operate in 1948 when they won that election.
Wow.
Now, when you went there as a lawyer, or you were in law school, so what led you to be in law school in Johannesburg?
So I was a law student at the University of Michigan here, and we had a professor who was like, I think there's some really interesting things going on in South Africa. Anybody want to go? And I was like, I think I do.
Okay.
So it was like a semester abroad program. And so it was a great opportunity to be in a country where they were writing a new constitution, a constitution that like took ours, our, pretty decent constitution and made it so much better. I mean, South Africa has probably the best constitution in the world right now. It's the best living document for justice and equality. Whether it works the way that it's supposed to work is a question for us and a question for them. But on paper, it's a pretty darn good constitution. So, yeah.
It's interesting that we're talking about South Africa because that country has recently been in the news as well.
A lot. Yes. And it's no surprise, right? When you think about, Elon Musk and you
Yeah.
think about, Peter Thiel and many of the people whose their family wealth were sort of built in South Africa. And, for Musk, I mean, his family actually moved to South Africa because they were party sympathizers. In 1948, when the National Party won that election, they were a far right party. And nobody knew that they were going to win. Like they had, Black people couldn't vote. They had white people voting. It was already a very conservative government. And then this fringe right party that had a platform of separate and a platform of, white nationalism. They woke up in the morning and they had actually won this election. And people were surprised and people were like, okay, it's not going to last forever. But it lasted 50 years and 50 years of terror. And to be fair, everything didn't start with the National Party in 1948 and the apartheid government, as we call it. Apartheid was, many parts of the apartheid system had already existed, but the National Party just turned the dial up. made it worse. And when you think about sort of what they said in their speech in 1948, they talked about sort of, we have two choices. We can either go down the road of equality, which means that, you know, everybody will be able to vote, but that would mean white suicide. I mean, they literally said this. It would mean white suicide. And, you know, in order to maintain the purity of the white race, we have to go the other route, which is separate apartheid. And so we're choosing that. And so in that respect, and this is what they said we have to mold the youth. We have to convince, you know, we have to convince people that, you know, Christianity is the way to proceed. We have to use the churches for that, and we have to keep everybody out. Anybody who wants to have influence in our country cannot tell us how we're supposed to operate, and they will be I think, I can't remember the language, but something like put down or dealt with or something like that, they said. And when you think about what's happening here, you think about sort of, you know, the Department of Education molding the youth. You think about sort of, you know, devaluing the humanity of other people, you know, all the USA ID dismantling, making sure that people are suppressed and sickly and, you know, and don't have opportunities. So you think about labor union busting, you think about EEOC, DEI, all of that dismantling that's going on. It's a playbook. It's the same playbook over and over again. And you know, and it's no surprise that there's a South African, you know, sort of calling the place for this.
Yeah, this is
So,
a really sad and scary time we're living in right now.
It is. It is.
I have another question about when they created the system in 1948. Do you know if they were looking at the United States in terms of, okay, I,
You
I
see my
struck a
face?
nerve. Yeah, I did. I did.
Yes,
I struck a
ma'am.
nerve there. Okay.
Yes.
In terms of the structure of the social settings here, although America wasn't uniform in terms of Black rights, you
That's
know,
right.
America's a
Yeah.
big country, so, you know, some places were much more liberal than others and so forth. But tell us about that as far as, you know, if they use it as a model for what they were about to do.
Absolutely. I mean, Jim Crow was huge for them. They looked at, you know, the whole idea of how you actually manage separating the races, right? Like, because it was I mean, think about sort of the demographic makeup of South Africa and the United States, right? You have very similar sort of groups of people. You have blacks, you have whites, you have Asians, right? And so what do we do with those people in between? What do we do with, you know, they call them coloreds in South Africa, but, you know, essentially they're mulattoes, mixed race people here. How do we manage them? You know, they give them a few more rights than, you know, than pure blacks, right? You give them a little bit more. So that whole system, the way that, you know, we had a very sophisticated you know, our South had a very sophisticated system of sort of separating people, keeping them at bay, having them compete with each other for like the smallest minuscule thing. You know, I don't have to tell you all this. And they were also looking to the Nazis, right? I mean, you know, the Nazis, so you've got Jim Crow on one side, you've got the Nazi movement happening on the other side. And so they had a lot of really interesting interesting sort of, you know, models to use for suppression and oppression. I mean, when you think about the violence the Nazis had used, that, you know, much of that came from Germany. And so, and now, if you watch what's happening here, we're now looking at the Nazis, and we're now looking at, not we, but some of them are now looking at the Nazis, and some of them are now looking at the South African Afrikaner regime. And so, like I said before, it's just this constant cycle. And, you know, in my opinion, if you really study it, you can see sort of what's coming next, because the playbook doesn't change.
Well, I do want to give a nod back to your book,
Oh, right,
just
that.
so
Yeah, the book.
so people can know how. So your book does not go back to the 40s. It starts with the Truth and Reconciliation
Yeah,
hearings
so
and
it's
all that.
1940, in 1996 and 2018. What I do is I do have my protagonist, Prudence, who is there in South Africa, understanding she has to understand what is happening in these hearings. And so you do get a little bit of this history about sort of the National Party and how Black people in South Africa think about it versus sort of how she thinks about it from her sort of American Jim Crow perspective. So you know, I play around a little bit with that, but generally you got two timelines: 2018 Washington D.C., 1996 Johannesburg.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so, um, I don't want to say how does it end, but because then that you don't want to do a spoiler.
That's a heck of a question, Gwen.
You have to read it to find out.
You have to read
Um,
it to find
but
out,
you
yeah.
said it's more like a suspense. So see, the female is the protagonist in the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's the key main character, and
Yes.
but the person that she's from her past,
Yes, he's South African.
he's South African.
He's South
Okay,
African, and so he shows up
okay,
at dinner,
okay.
and then you get to see sort of what went down in 1996 between them that makes him want to come and ask her for a very, very big favor that she
A
cannot.
favor. Oh,
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah, that she can't necessarily say no to because he's got some leverage.
mm.
okay. It sounds like a very
It,
interesting
this
story.
sounds intriguing for
It
real.
really does,
Yeah.
and different.
I hope
And
so. I
different.
hope
And
so.
then the final couple of minutes that we have, your other books that were before this one, were they in a similar vein? Did they have a historical bent or contemporary or?
Yeah, no, they're both historical. I mean, I promised myself I wasn't gonna write any more historical books, and so this is this is the closest I come to like a contemporary novel, 1996 and 2018. But the first
Mhm.
book was Till the Well Runs Dry, and that was set in the late 1940s to 1960s about a woman who leaves Trinidad and migrates to America. That story is actually based on my grandmother's story.
Mhm.
A
Okay.
little historical fiction. And then I go way, way back to the 1700s with my second book, Book of the Little Axe, which is kind of a sweeping family saga about a family who's in Trinidad in the late 1700s when the English take over the island, steal the island, essentially. And the English had a very different colonial ruling style than the Spanish did. And so these free Black people realize they're not going to be so free when the English come into that island. And so one of the children actually takes off and heads to the American West and lives with the Crow Native American tribe. And so she's sort of there. And it's a really sort of a complex, geographically complex novel, but I think it actually works to show you sort of how what's happened in the Caribbean is just about to happen in the United States. Literally, the colonial domination, the killing off of indigenous people, then the continued enslavement of Black people. So you can see those two parallels. So very, very different.
Okay. Well, show us the cover again of Casualties of Truth.
Yes, thank you.
And it's available wherever books are sold. And
Yeah,
so get your copy. And
thank you.
Lauren, welcome to the show again. And thank you for being a guest.
Thank
And it's very
you.
intriguing conversation. What
I
took us
enjoyed
across
talking.
the pond, so to speak.
Across and down, yes, down the
Yeah.
pond.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you have a great evening and
Thank you, too.
congratulations on the success of your book.
Great.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
Lovely talking to you. Bye-bye.
Have a great
Good
night.
night.
You too. Bye.
Okay, well, that's the end of the show this week. We'll have another great show for you next week. And remember to vote in the Black Authors Matter TV Awards process. So I'm Gwen Richardson signing off. We'll see you next Tuesday.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
Thank you for tuning in and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.